Good morning and welcome to a morning outlook. This is Kim speaking on Monday the 20th of November. So as the month slips by, so does the market, and the euro slipped down overnight. So let's have a look. Well, the reasoning why is Merkel's found to make a coalition government at the moment, and well, she's may go back for another vote yet. So a bit of uncertainty around Germany at the moment. As we're seeing it at the moment, though, we've gapped down through the news there. We're pushing up at the moment. There's a weekly pivot just above, which may provide a point of resistance, but they'll still leave a gap. I'll bring it down to this hourly picture. Would still leave a gap. I mean, a daily pivot would fill that gap. So there's a couple of points above us if we do see any momentum in this, but it may be just one of those gaps that are left for a short while. We'll see. Really, to the downside, maybe there may be opportunities if you're looking to try and play what was starting to look weak. It certainly looked weak last Thursday. Wednesday. Thursday sort of left us a little bit unsure. Friday pops up and drops a little bit, but maybe it's now confirmed a lower high in the market. So within this thought of weakness, there are a couple of potential points for it to move back to and stay within that sort of weak zone, and as I say, close that pivot. So I would be watching that this morning just to see how it reacts. It may be getting up to the weekly pivot. There's a 60-21 there at the same place. They may be just strong enough just to stall it for now, but there's still that potential, as I say, with this being so freshly so such a fresh gap may get filled in the earlier part of this week. We'll see. My preference on the euro is still to the downside, though, at the moment. Okay, so looking at the pound. Now the pound is going the other way at the moment. It's firming up overnight. It could be starting to look to push through that daily 50 one. I mean, it tested it and just pipped through it a little by a pip or two, but what it's looking like at the moment, it could be sort of shaping up for that. It broke the sort of intermediate trend that we had across this 4-hourly time frame, and come back, and it's sort of tested the lows of that, but it's got a weekly pivot below, which could be a bit of a draw. It did sit there, even though it did make some progress last week. It is still relatively range bound for much of it. Now, if that sort of that trend continues, well, we could end up back towards that weekly pivot a little bit easier, but for now, looking reasonably solid, although just looking from an hourly point of view, and there is a bit of a Gartley pattern sitting there at the moment. So oops, badly drawn, but there we go, bit of a Gartley pattern going on. So there's still the potential for it to come over for that weekly pivot if it starts failing. So be a point to be watching for any sort of weakness there. May give us an opportunity to play it back for the weekly pivot back towards Friday's lows. Alternatively, well, there's the upside at the moment, to push up towards Friday's highs would be a sensible target, but may have to just wait for this morning just to see how it starts panning out there. Dollar yen. We saw the yen gain quite a bit there. There's some uncertainties about the tax reform in the US as well, and we've seen that sort of coming through, and it's a sort of a once again risk-off picture by looks of things, because the yen seems to benefit from this, and it's benefiting at the moment. Good solid push down towards the daily 200s. Now we've ticked off that 50. Now looks like the 200 is well in fair reach. So with that in mind, any sort of retracements, we've got the weekly pivot above us there. That could be a short-term target, but would be looking to potentially sell off that. Now when you look at the hourlies here, we saw this on a Friday. We just saw that it consolidate, never really managed to get any distance to the upside there for those that were looking for the long side. It's still got the potential for the long side up to the daily pivot and weekly pivot above. Both could be targets at some point, and also depending on how they're hit, could also become sell points in this downward trend that we're seeing here. So that's dollar yen, Aussie dollar. The Aussie dollar found a bit of support on Friday off of the 500 daily 500 moving average. There's again weekly pivot above here, which could again provide a bit of a target for it. Had a little bit of a gap through the Asian session by the looks of things. I don't know how clear a gap that was on all brokers, but it's filled that anyway, and it's looking at the moment like it's shaping up maybe for the daily and possibly the weekly pivot there. There certainly would be good early targets for this week. By the time it gets that weekly pivot, I would be looking potentially shorting again. Again, it may be putting in a bit of a weak pattern. At the moment, we've still got to bear in mind the intermediate stroke bigger trend actually here now of these lower highs, lower lows, and I'd rather be on the short side than the long side at this moment. Although there was a bit of divergence coming in on this hourly time frame, there's little in the way of the daily time frame to give me much there really. Though I'm looking, there was a bit of a divergence on the RSI here between those lows without us peaking too much on the RSI up to the 50. Didn't really get back there, so maybe there's a slight issue of divergences, but there's quite some time between the move. Okay, and finally the Canadian dollar. So the Canadian dollar's been playing well, sit on the fence here really. It's literally been sitting on its trend line over the last week. It's still working its way a little bit more positively, but and it's a real slow move, as you can see from this 4 hourly. That overall in the week it pushed up, closed up on the week. At the moment it's just pulling back towards the weekly pivot, which is not far below now, but the high lows, high highs, it's got that sort of intermediate trend that's kicking through there. So whether it can hold on to this today. Actually, you've got the daily pivot just below us now, and the weekly just beyond that. Both those would be relatively good targets. Again, though, just got to need to watch just post 8 o'clock, see what comes from that. So there's some potential at those 2 points there this morning for the market for that Canadian dollar to come back down to. And again, it's been sitting in some sort of chop during the days, but still, as I said, it's got a trend of upside. Okay, news-wise today then, there's very little news out of significance today. There, you would have looked and you see, well, hang on a minute, Draghi's speaking, but Draghi's actually speaking. He's testifying before the European Parliamentary Economic and Monetary Affairs Committee. So basically, he'll probably be talking much of what's already been said. He rarely goes off of his previous statements or change his statement midway, so I would expect it to be really more of the same if we hear anything coming from that. So that's Draghi speaking. He's actually speaking twice today at 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. So that's what's kicking out there. So on 4 p.m. he's talking about the due to testify on the European Systematic Risk Board. There we go, such greatness. We don't know, 4 o'clock he may just create a bit of volatility through the market there if he talks about risk, and he may be talking about Brexit, of course, and everything else, and it tends to give the market a little bit of a kicker. So there we go, that's it for today. Have a great one. Bye for now.